Welcome to this channel, which is devoted to a reading and better understanding of the book Ascent of Mount Carmel by St. John of the Cross. And today we're on the 35th chapter of the third book. Upon completion of the third book, we're going to move on to Dark Night of the Soul, also by St. John of the Cross. Now, these coming chapters toward the conclusion of this book are extremely interesting, and they may motivate us to reevaluate some of our personal practices. In this chapter, St. John discusses spiritual good things that cause joy to the will. And he tells us that there are four kinds, and they are motivating, provocating, directing, and perfecting. And it appears that when St. John wrote this chapter, he planned to write on all four of these things, but as it turns out, he's primarily writing about things that motivate us, such as images, portraits of saints, oratories, and ceremonies. Regarding images and portraits, there may be much vanity and vain rejoicing in these, for though they are most important for divine worship, and most necessary to move the will to devotion as shown by the approval given to them, and the use made of them by our Mother Church, there are many persons who rejoice rather in the painting and the decoration of them than in what they represent. As you may recall, St. John earlier made it very clear that images and the imagination aren't bad things. In fact, for beginners, they're an absolute necessity. Even for someone who is advanced, images, at least mental images, are needed for intercessory and meditative prayer. However, he also told us that in order for us to advance, we can't be anchored or attached to images. St. John tells us that the Church uses images primarily for two reasons, and they are for us to revere the saints in them and to move our wills and to awaken our devotion to the saints. St. John tells us that when images serve these two purposes, they are beneficial and most necessary. We must choose those images that are most true and lifelike, and that most move the will to devotion, and our eyes must be ever fixed upon this motive rather than upon the value and cunning of their workmanship and decoration. There are some who pay more attention to the cunning with which an image is made and to its value than to what it represents, and that interior devotion which they ought to direct spiritually to the saint whom we don't see, forgetting the image at once, since it serves only as a motive. They squander upon the cunning and the decoration of its outward workmanship, and this is a complete hindrance to true spirituality. So what do you think St. John of the Cross would think about this very unsettling sculpture that is boldly displayed in Pope Paul VI Audience Hall in the Vatican? St. John continues, "It is a detestable custom which certain persons observe regarding images in our days. Not abhorring the vain trappings of the world, they adorn images with the garments which from time to time vain persons invent to satisfy their own pleasures and vanities. So they clothe images with garments, abhorrent to the saints whom the images represent." Here's a screenshot of a forum post that Catholic Answers. Evidently it's a thing to dress up saints in little outfits. Please note that I'm not saying that this is an evil thing. It's just that this doesn't really do anything to help us to advance in holiness. In this way, the honest and grave devotion of the soul, which rejects and spurns all vanity and every trace of it, becomes with them little more than a dressing of dolls. If St. John was alive today, I'd love to ask him what he thinks of the infant Jesus of Prague statue. And I assume that even though the statue is associated with the Carmelites, he wouldn't be enthusiastic that the emphasis that some people have is on the statue's vestments, and instead their emphasis should be on the devotion of their hearts. The person who is truly devout sets his devotion principally upon that which is invisible. He needs few images and uses few. For not only does an image belonging to this world in no way influence his desire, it does not even lead him to think of this world, nor is his heart attached to the images that he uses. If they are taken away from him, he grieves very little. Our emphasis shouldn't be on the image, but instead what the image represents. We should have icons, statues, or pictures in our homes, but we shouldn't have great attachments to them or dwell on the artistic merit of them. If one is taken away from one reason or another, it shouldn't cause us sadness. The more closely a soul is attached to an image or a motive, the less will its devotion and prayer mount to God. Now please note that St. John acknowledges that some images motivate devotion more than others. However, we should still avoid attachment to them. Images are just instruments used in prayer. Remember that we will be unable to enter contemplative prayer in total forgetfulness if we are occupied by the things of the senses. Some of us may need to use meditative prayer before slipping into contemplative prayer, and we may use the images as instruments or tools for that first part. St. John warns us that this type of thing can raise its head when we become attached to particular rosaries that we use. And assuming all the beads are intact, one rosary isn't superior to another. Rosaries are merely a counting device for saying prayers. Yet we often become attached to one for one reason or another. Our joy should be centered on the prayers rather than upon the instrument we use for saying the prayers. Actually, if we have 10 fingers upon which we can count, we really don't need rosary beads. It is most vexatious to see certain spiritual persons so greatly attached to the manner and workmanship of these instruments and motives, and to the curiosity and vain pleasure which they find in them. You will never see them satisfied. They'll be continually leaving one thing for another and forgetting and forsaking spiritual devotion for these visible things to which they have affection and attachment, and from this they receive no small harm. Well, I hope you enjoyed this installment. We'll be back again in about a week with another one. The next one's going to be very interesting, so please do check it out. But in the meantime, please check out my Facebook page, which is linked down below, and please pray for the church.